Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Radio Bible Light, your spiritual friend. Radio Bible Light offers Christian guidance 24/7 on our website, which is radiobiblelight.com. You could also reach us through phone. Toll-free number is 1-800-930-3475, or you can also text us at 1-587-887-4453. You can also reach us through email at info@radiobiblelight.com. Clayton, would you do introductions?
All right, good evening, everyone. So tonight we're going to be the host. Myself is Clayton and Denitsa. We're going to have two guests with us, Lorena and Sebastian. They both have some experience in social media, and the topic tonight is actually going to be social media. And maybe we're going to look at some of the pros and cons of how it can be used in the church, in beneficial ways or even in harmful ways. So to start off, maybe we'll just get a little bit of a background on our two hosts tonight. So Sebastian, if you want to tell us just a little bit about yourself and your experience with social media.
For sure. My name is Sebastian Gonzalez, and I have about 7 years working in the digital advertising space as a web developer. And I, previous to that, was in college for a couple years taking a new media course. So all in all, I have close to 10 years of experience working in and around the online world.
Great. And Lorena?
My name is Lorena. I was introduced to social media from the back point of view about a year and a half ago, I would say, and just learning more and more every day about it and the pros and cons that come with it.
Great. So tonight we'll start off, of course, with prayer, and as we get going, we'll start with some questions. It may turn into a little bit of a discussion as well, but to start off, why don't we just have a quick word of prayer? So, dear Lord, we just ask that as we talk about this subject matter tonight, that you'll be with us in our thoughts and in our discussions, that we may think of ways that we can use social media in a positive way to influence the church and to better spread your word, Lord. I pray that you'll keep us focused on topic, and for those who are listening to be able to gain a blessing from this as well. We just ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. All right. So before we get this going, I guess, to make it clear for everybody, we should probably cover what social media is, and getting a quick definition on that would be helpful.
All right, so I looked this up before we started here tonight, found a few definitions, but one that probably was a little bit more inclusive went like this. It says, social media is the collective of online communication channels dedicated to community-based input, interaction, content sharing, and collaboration. So if we bring that back to you guys, does that sound reasonable, or do you want to change that definition?
Well, I think it's a pretty accurate blanket statement as to how it could be. As in essence, social media, I guess the important thing would be to separate what it is in the online world and understand that social media is a part of the web. It's a part of your presence online, but it's not basically everything to do with the web. So I think the definition basically states that it's more community focused. So your audience that's in a collective in a certain, a certain community that have access to information that's being served to you through social media. I'd say that's a pretty fair definition for sure.
Great. All right. So often I think people will right away lean towards cell phones as the biggest part of social media. Agree with that?
I'd say so, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think. Well, the one thing that's interesting there is that the cell phone is essentially a device that caters to the social media side of things, and I think when you think about a phone, you think everything to do with the phone may pertain to social media. But I guess the main thing to connect the phone with social media would be the applications and platforms that we can use there.
Right. So let's maybe talk about a few of the platforms then. So there's a lot of ones that might come to mind: Facebook, Instagram. Are those social media, or what are maybe the top most used platforms that you would define?
Instagram is definitely growing right now, but as you mentioned, there are a few, and all of them, they help provide different aspects, different ways of advertising and reaching different audiences through them. Instagram is very visually based. first thing you see when you log into Instagram is you see a photo, and below the photo there's a description. And furthermore, you could select a link that's provided in the profile of where the photo is originating from.
Do you think social media is mainly used for advertising? Because you kind of took on that point.
It can be used for advertising. It can also be used as a way to engage with your community, with your followers. Provide them with different ways to educate them. For example, if they have questions, you could answer with videos. Instagram, I believe, has upped in the past year their videos from a few seconds to, I think it was half a minute, to now a full minute. And again, you can view them over and over again if you have new friends that are asking the same questions you were asking in the past.
I think it's also interesting, I think the main point of, because advertising is a huge part of it, but mostly social media is a means of communication, and also hopefully focused communication. So when you have an audience that's interested in a certain thing, or an audience that's tapping your social media feed for a certain bit of information, you can focus that group with a certain bit of communication, whether that's advertising in some cases, or you reaching out to let them know of certain events that are upcoming. Like Lorena was mentioning, Instagram is very visually driven. But it's interesting when you see the differences in platforms when you compare, for example, Instagram to Twitter. Twitter has almost a niche audience because there are a lot of people out there that have zero experience with Twitter, haven't used it, haven't created an account, simply because there's no need to utilize Twitter. They're fine with their social media outlets and they don't have to use it. On the flip side, there are certain industries and markets that leverage Twitter immensely because it's perfectly fit for what they need. For example, sports fans are huge on Twitter when they want to access information on their specific players or teams or whatever. Twitter is a better platform versus Instagram for that kind of thing, where you want to just get simple bits of information served to you right away. And then of course, we have things like Instagram, Facebook that are far more visually driven. So it's interesting just to see how each platform differentiates from each other and gives different opportunities to the user.
When it comes to the church community, there are so many things happening within the church. So you have your events, you have your outreach programs, you have the engagement with your youth and just your congregation in general. So if every platform has its own focus, when it comes to the church community, what would be your recommendation in terms of what platform would be best for events or best for an outreach or, something else?
Well, it's interesting when you think about what you're trying to communicate. For example, one form of social media post or a social media post could be sharing a thought. So the thought isn't driving users anywhere. It's not driving you to an actionable, like I have to purchase this or I have to go here and read this. It's basically sharing content with you. Let's say that a church wanted to post a simple article or a simple motivational post. Things like Instagram or Facebook, but primarily Instagram are elite platforms for this kind of thing. Where on the flip side, if you were looking to contact or let people know of an event that's upcoming, or perhaps something that was discussed and you'd like to give information to, or give a location to more information of that topic, Twitter, Facebook, also the difference in Facebook and Twitter is large, but both of them are good for that difference in sending that kind of information out. So when it comes to the church, I'd say Instagram is interesting because Instagram almost allows you to be specialized. You can cater your single post. Instead of a giant gallery, you have one or a few images to post, and you focus all your attention on that single content that you're distributing, so you can perhaps share something with a bit more thought to it. If a church or if it wants to perhaps communicate something about a lecture or a sermon that's coming up, that actually is pretty diverse in terms of the platforms you could utilize for that. So yeah, in terms of suggestions, it's pretty far out there, and in no way is any industry isolated to one kind of platform, whether it's Twitter or Instagram. It's very interesting how useful all of them are and how they can all tie together.
I've heard about 80-20 rule when it comes to more of marketing and online space, where you want to have obviously a percentage of your community, your organization. So in this case, whether you're advertising, let's say a church gathering or a Bible study, but then you also want to have other sources tied into your social media channel. So if you know that there's something happening within just religion in general, you also want to kind of tie that into your channel. Is that a right assumption? Or it should be only focused on things happening with our church, with our congregation, or...
Well, I think Lorena could probably talk more into the actual content of what's posted. I think...
Yeah, definitely the 80-20 rule is very popular, and I would recommend introducing a few others. It's like a community, basically. It's a social community. And when you reach out to others that are definitely relatable to your topics, to what you believe in, and to what you are trying to discuss and promote, you get to know more people that are part of the same community by reaching out to them and reposting what they are posting, and it's like you're building a bigger and bigger community.
Okay, and with that, I think there's you're also going to run into the challenges, of course. So, can we look at maybe a few of the key benefits of a church that might be considering or on the fence of, should I use social media or should I stay off? Because I've heard good things, I've heard bad things. What are a few benefits that you think could really help a church by using social media?
I would say the biggest one would be getting your name out there and getting people, showing people what you are about, what you believe in, and just teaching. It's a platform where you could also educate a little bit.
Okay, reaching a broad audience, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay. Dangers?
There's a few of those as well.
Yeah, I think with anything that lives online, social media being one of them, there is a danger. That's inherited responsibility on the user, on the person who's navigating whatever they are, navigating to understand the risks of what it is to be online, to put your information online, to post, even to share anything online. There are different types of threats out there. So social media is by no means completely safe in terms of that kind of thing. You have to understand how to do things properly. And on the flip side of that, you should also understand that social media is safe to do. It's not something that you should be afraid of or you should be concerned about. The only thing there is basically learning how to use it and then learning how to be safe online. Not so much on social media, but just online in general. So in terms of some of the dangers that could be out there, for example, if we look at security online, not just social media, but any presence you have there, if your Twitter account or if your Instagram account was accessed by another person, that there is a person speaking to all your audience on your behalf about whatever they want to talk about. The damage for that, of what that could be extensive, it could be nothing. So that's definitely one of the things to be aware of.
But it also makes it very easy for those people, right? Because there are also people that are not educated on the topic, let's say your account is talking about, but they will put their opinion out there. So it kind of also opens up a channel for everybody and anybody to, say their thoughts, whether they're negative, whether they're aggressive, right or wrong. So if that happens towards a church, and let's say the church has an official account, what is the best way to address some of those, whether it's negative comments or just anything that's been shared on that platform?
When it comes to online ethics, it's a huge topic. For example, when you're looking at it from a church's point of view, most of what you would share through social media welcomes comments. A lot of platforms have the ability to shut this off, but there's benefits to having your traffic, your users out there contribute and give you comments and things like that. I think one thing that people who are new to social media or thinking of jumping on have to understand is you will almost always get negative comments. You will. It doesn't matter what platform you're doing. It doesn't matter what you're posting. You have to understand that when a person is online sharing their thoughts, they're doing so behind the blanket of anonymity. Nobody really knows who they are, so they can say things that they normally wouldn't say, that the real them wouldn't do, and just put it out there, and you'd be surprised how many people do that.
They take a lot more liberties to be able to spout that either opinion, which is okay in many respects, but often the hatred as well.
Yeah, it's very, those things that you may reserve in person, you won't do it online. So I think people who do, start to engage in social media and utilize it for its strengths have to understand there's a little bit of that is almost unavoidable. And of course, like I said, there are ways of mitigating that kind of problem.
Yeah, and I think that there's a great verse that talks about it. I think it's Proverbs 18:2. Could you read it to us, if you have it up here?
Sure. Let me just. That.
It provides a little bit of guidance on just communication in those situations and how to handle that.
So Proverbs 18:2 says, "A fool has no delight in understanding, but in expressing his own heart." I guess we often see that in the responses. Sometimes they're not really thoughtful. And we can do it as a church or as a church member. I think we can often respond to something as well in that same connotation, that we're quick response to defend our position, but without taking the time to consider what we're actually writing.
Yeah, comments online, they do encourage, unfortunately, a lot of speaking without thinking. So it's also up to the people who are commenting to understand how to properly utilize online services.
Yes, but I do think it's very important to take the opportunity and respond prayerfully and lovingly. And if they would like to turn it into a discussion, then take it into a private message, or maybe they could give you a phone call and you can discuss it further.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because a lot of times people might be having the same questions, and so it can be an opportunity again that we can reach out to some of these people who may not want to hear it right now. We don't have to teach them everything, or we don't have to preach anything to them, but just even giving a loving response
Exactly.
can be beneficial.
Yes. And it speaks towards your personality and who you are as a whole.
So I guess looking at the broad population, or the amount of people that you can reach through social media now, a common positive for the church, and a verse that would probably often be brought up, is the verse Matthew 28, verse 19, which says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit." So go therefore and make disciples of all nations, I think being an important part there. Do you think social media is, first of all, do you think it's necessary for us to do this? Or do you think it's beneficial for us to do this?
I think it's, I think it would probably be a little bit of both, because it really opens up a lot of doors. You no longer have to send mass emails. You can just do one post and reach out anyone who is interested, and reach out to all of your followers. And it's already there. It won't accidentally get deleted. It's there for you or for them to review in the future when they would like to go back towards it.
Okay.
And sorry, do you think that that's a substitute in any way, or it's more of an addition to other ways of getting the message out there? So, for example, attending church and Bible studies and, small groups. Do you think that, just watching the sermon online every week and just listening to, an audio recording of sort, do you think that that's pretty much it? Or is there more to it?
I think it's like a little helpful guide. If you can't make it because of weather, or because you are out of town but you really wanted to see the sermon that day, if you wanted to just enjoy it from the comfort of your own home one day when you were tired, wanted to sleep in.
Yeah. And even just thinking of reaching people with that information. Because the thing is, you're posting your information out there, but the interesting thing is, for example, in social media, a lot of people will automatically gravitate to things they like and look for that information. So, for example, if I'm subscribed to the church's account for something, and then I get fed information or a bit of news that I wouldn't have known because I don't check my email, or I don't check other sources of information, but there it is, then immediately the church has accessed a different viewership that perhaps they wouldn't have if they were to do it through traditional means, because they have audience actually out there on updated means like the social media platforms.
Yeah.
Do you think it takes us off the hook from using some of those traditional means, from going person to person?
No.
Or is it an added benefit?
I think it's an added benefit.
Because I know a lot of times I think people will say, well, I posted something today, and so that's my witness for the day. And so you don't want it to maybe take away from the actual conversations that you're going to have with people as well.
Yeah, that's true. It's in no way a shortcut when it comes to that, but a great tool to start the conversation and traffic people to where you want them to go.
And I think it also can become a danger that in our social media accounts, we have to still uphold what we believe and what we teach, because that becomes open to the public as well. So if you're telling them one thing in person at church, and they go online and you're a completely different person in your social media account, that can create a challenge as well. So I think it it can be a huge benefit, but it can also be a stumbling block or a cause of hypocrisy if people are seeing one thing from one angle.
Yeah, and it's interesting because thinking about that is if you're also thinking about it from a church point of view or even a church member point of view, you wouldn't want your online persona to differ very much from your actual persona.
Exactly, yeah.
So again, that's a platform that it can easily give you opportunity to do so, but then there's user responsibility, how one chooses to interact with the program, how one chooses to share and speak about oneself.
And speaking to the interaction of the program, one thing I really like, because I do manage my church's Instagram, and what I love about it is that, there's a certain group of people that are following the account, but that doesn't mean that those are the only people that are going to see my posts that I'm, presenting out there. So just as Sebastian said that, anybody that has similar interests will look for that type of topic. If I'm sharing an event happening at church, it could reach everybody within the city that could be interested in participating. So I think that is a great ability and really kind of expands the audience that you can get in touch with.
Yeah, one of the best points that was ever told to me about social media was thinking of it as it's like vines and branches reaching out, in terms of you can extend to a certain distance, but then all of a sudden that will extend further through reposting or through sharing of any sorts, and all of a sudden you've hit an audience you didn't actually intend to hit, but now you've got a larger volume just because of how that outreach can kind of spread out through time.
And talking about volume, if we look at a few of the numbers, statistics that were put together here. So these, again, may be not completely accurate now because all of these platforms are changing constantly. So they may be larger now, they may be a bit smaller. But it gives us a rough idea of the number of people that can be reached. It shows the total number of monthly active users for Facebook is just over 2 billion people. That's enormous. We've never had this sort of ability to reach somebody so quickly in all parts of the world. Not that everyone has it, but that's a large part of the population that's using those sort of platforms. So that's just Facebook. The others, I don't know if we have some of the others here.
Yeah, the total number of monthly active Instagram users is about 800 million. Again, imagine the manpower that it would take to reach those people without an online space.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes.
Like whether it's having a church with number of ministers or door to door, it'll be impossible. Also, like language barrier. Some of those platforms are available. I think Facebook alone is available in over 100 languages. Like that is an advantage that not many places would provide.
And actually the interesting thing too is that you said active accounts. So these are accounts that are in use. These are not dormant accounts, accounts that have been forgotten about. These are users that are on either every day or every second day engaging with it. So yeah, it's interesting.
And then Twitter, just to throw it out there, is about 330 monthly active users. So those are probably the three biggest platforms, I believe. So those combined, and many of them have multiple accounts, but you're reaching an enormous part of the population that way. And as was brought up, different languages, different cultures, different religious beliefs, maybe some people who have limitations in having access to any other method.
Also, demographics is a big thing when it comes to the online space, because there's this stigma that, social media is just for young people. Right? And, this is the kids' world, and, everybody just is constantly on their phone, which to an extent, it is true.
Yeah.
It can get addictive.
Yes, but what about the older generation? There's a demographic out there that could also benefit, but do you think maybe it doesn't as much because there are a certain kind of pre-notion that, it's just the kids' stuff? Not relevant to me, not serious. It's not used for serious subject matters, and it's only for, funny cats.
Speaking of funny cats, that would be YouTube.
There we go.
I don't know. I would say that becomes a bit more personal. If it's opinionated, and if you are willing to accept and learn and try to figure some things out, then you'd be willing to do some research, and you'll stumble upon our YouTube channel or a Facebook page
Or Radio Bible Light.
Exactly.
I guess my question is most towards the importance of it, because if you look around, the majority of the leadership roles in the church are probably held by kind of, I don't want to say older generation, but less youth are leading the church. As an overview. So do you think that there will be a resistance to an extent using social media in the church because of that?
I personally, I think yes and no. I don't think I want to target everybody of a certain generation that they're all against one means or another.
Yeah.
I myself, I'm not really keen on a lot of social media aspects. And I think they can be right in many degrees, that I think it can become a problem in the church as much as it become a benefit. So if you're looking for the problems, you're going to see the problems. If you're looking for the benefits, you're probably going to see the benefits. So it's good to kind of, as we're doing, talk about some of the pros and cons to it. So I think when, as Denitsa says, you're bringing that up, sometimes it'll be, okay, this is maybe the pastor who's preaching and seeing everybody on their phones. As any speaker, that's not usually the best thing or the first thing you want to see, that everybody's on their phones. And understandably, maybe they're on their Bible, but can the Bible also be used as, I have the Bible on my phone, so suddenly this is okay all the time? Granted, many people are on their Bible until a text comes in. So it can also, I think, bring in some of those distractions. So there's maybe a justified resistance.
Yeah, when you think about that point of view, for sure, when you would see a bunch of people down looking at a screen, that's not a very good look. So you can definitely understand why people would be resistant to it. As humans, we're creatures of habit. We find something we like, we get used to it, and that's what we're good with. When it comes to older demographics looking at social media with apprehension, that's normal. I think that's normal for anything that you need to learn and have to pick up that you haven't before. But I think the interesting thing about us is that a lot of us actually came from the millennial generation that's almost at the start of it, right when it first kicked off. A lot of us didn't have our cell phones right away. We had to beg our parents for them at a later stage, and we sort of grew up with the growth of cell phones, with flip phones, which turned into the Razor, and now we have smartphones. So it's definitely something that takes practice and also knowledge on things to be safe, things not to do. And also understand that joining social media by no means joining everything. You can very easily find one platform that hits your niche perfectly, and that's where you live and that's where you post, and you're perfect in that world. It's basically a large tool that you can choose to use how you wish to. But yeah, it does take a little bit of practice, a little bit of getting used to, like almost anything.
Yeah.
And probably a little bit of discipline as well.
Yes.
For sure.
Right.
Anything it's to do with anything with our phones, really.
It could be like quite a distraction, whether it's in church or outside of church. So if we want to use it as a tool to spread the message and educate or promote or anything that sort, that's great. But I guess keeping in mind the negative side and promoting discipline with social media, I think is quite important. Do you have any tips around how to control distractions, at least while we're in church?
Yeah, you could. For example, you could turn off certain notifications while you're in church. There's the Do Not Disturb button on almost all phones nowadays.
I think they all have
unless you
that.
use a very old one.
Something like airplane mode.
Yeah. Exactly.
So for
Or
those who
night
don't
mode for
know,
some.
those things will allow you to use your Bible app or your other applications without receiving text messages, without receiving phone calls. So you can concentrate on the Bible just as you were holding a Bible without that text popping in and you being tempted to read it and respond, and suddenly you're in a conversation. So I think those are great ways that you can find the benefits, and to be able to have all of this Bible, all of this religious material in our hands all the time can be an enormous benefit. So just to say that is should not be taken because there's possible distractions, might be better to find some of these ways to mitigate those distractions.
Yes.
Yeah, and even as how churches started to use video and projectors and things like that. When once new tech shows up, there's always ways of leveraging that in different ways. And like you said, for devices in church, you could put your Bible, other versions of Bibles, other articles, anything you want on there, and in one point, take notes, do it all on that one device. So I think it is something that takes getting used to, seeing that at church, but it's definitely something that could be accepted as a norm.
Okay. Yeah.
No, I was just...
So I think a lot of people are, as we've talked about, maybe it's a younger issue for the growing generation. So we, as you mentioned, we're all kind of in an age category where we grew up as cell phones and as social media was being introduced. So we didn't grow up with it as a part of us. Many people now, they've known no different. So everything they do is attached to their cell phone. So do you think by a church maybe being more reluctant to at least investigate social media is kind of cutting those people off, or creating a block for them to maybe hear something?
In terms of cutting them off, to me would sound a bit too far in terms of how it is.
Yeah.
But one thing that it could do is, you could think that you want to, for example, reach a younger audience or reach a certain type of people. And if you were to make the decision that, well, in this organization, in this church, we're not going to engage in social media, we're not going to do any of that kind of thing, we're going to stick to our traditional means, you could inadvertently be neglecting that audience out there. It goes without saying, though, that using social media to hit that audience and to speak to those people isn't necessarily enough, because then you go into the discussions of what are you posting, and is that stimulating or interesting to the person reading it, or will they just dismiss it? But in terms of what you're asking, I think that you're not necessarily cutting people off, but you are losing an opportunity to reach people that would probably not be there otherwise.
Okay.
In all honesty, if somebody wants to be on their phone, whether it's on social media or to be texting, you can't really cut them off. I mean, everybody has a smartphone in their hands these days, right? So,
Yes.
and everybody brings it into church. I don't personally see a way of cutting it off to that degree, but I do see a benefit of I wanted to bring back the digital Bible a little bit, because it has a little bit of a negative view because of all the distraction that could come with a phone. But in your opinion, is there a benefit in using digital Bible versus an actual paper Bible, or vice versa? Whether it's, somebody just learning the Bible, or has their notes and highlighted verses, and
it does have its benefits, to the point where, for example, English is my second language, and when I first started using a Bible, trying to learn it in English was difficult. So now, if I would have grown up with a phone that gives me the option of reading it in Romanian, would have been a lot easier to keep up with what was going in the church, because sometimes it is easier to read it than it is to listen to it being preached. It all depends on your learning skills as well.
That's true, actually, because it is very individualistic in terms of how a person absorbs information.
Yeah.
And like Lorena says, if I didn't even think of the ability to translate things right on the fly, if you understand a certain language better than another, reading something, a digital Bible would be exactly perfect for that. The interesting thing, though, is I would find myself initially to be on the opposite side. And this is my personal opinion, I would like my children to know where the chapters are and all the books of the Bible. Obviously, I was taught that way, and I had the physical Bible. But I would want still my kids to know how to find a certain scripture, or where the books are in the actual physical Bible. However, down the road, I would completely encourage using a digital book. I mean, using a digital Bible or a digital device opens up so many opportunities in terms of how you can learn. But there's definitely an appreciation, I think, for those core values of understanding there are certain things that are still good to know, still good to teach as habits, but that doesn't mean you have to do only that.
Yes.
And also, I see another point where there's somebody that is just, starting to attend a church, is just learning the Bible, whether you don't own a Bible, right, or you're not comfortable carrying one anywhere you go with you. Having the ability to just pull it up on your phone and validate whatever you hear at the same time, I think is also an added benefit to the digital version.
Yeah, accessibility is a huge part. Ease of access, how quick you can do that. Everybody wants information quick. I think when you're given testimony about anything to do with the church, that would be an asset.
Yeah, the quick part caught my attention. This day and age, everybody wants everything at the tip of their fingers, right? So you want to be able to multitask. You want everything to be just delivered to you right away. So I know that a lot of the times, I would personally just, do a chore or something around the house and listen to an audio file at the same time, right? Or have something in the background playing. Do you think that church material would be a good use for those situations, or you think that it requires a person's full attention?
I think it comes back to your learning skills. It's a very individual, personal kind of thing. I like listening or watching something as I'm cooking in the kitchen, for example. And I do pay attention, and I do remember it later on, but everyone's a little bit different. Whether you like to sit down half an hour every day at the end of the day to relax with the book in your hand and read, or watch one of the live streaming videos that are on Facebook and our website. It's all up to you. Yeah, but I do think there's a benefit in having a podcast, for example.
Yeah, and the podcast is an interesting one too, because it's basically the opportunity to have something read to you. You don't have to sit down and dedicate everything to absorbing this information. You could multitask. But even understanding that, like Lorena says, some people enjoy just the background noise. And furthermore, some people enjoy that background noise to be something that's related to the church. Even if it's reading something you've just studied or whatever it is, even that could definitely bring a feeling of fulfillment to a person. But then again, also understanding that if you are wanting to listen to a podcast with the objective of completely absorbing and applying the information like you would a written piece of literature, maybe leaving it as background noise isn't the ideal way of doing it. But it's got multiple ways of using things like podcasts.
Right.
Yeah.
So speaking of background noise, I think we're going to just take a quick, short little break. We've gone a little bit over the halfway mark, but during the break, enjoy the background noise. Grab your social media, find us. Again, you can reach us many forms: Facebook, Twitter, through our website. So if you have any questions, feel free to send them over, and we'll be back with you in a few minutes. All right, welcome back. So over the break, somebody did jump on and send us a question. So just receiving that. So let's direct that over to our guests here. So the question is, or maybe it's a statement, I haven't read it yet. Technology is great with all the opportunities it gives us for communication, information, and much more. But like every other good thing, when it is overused, is bad. Especially with the kids, they cannot control themselves, and for no time are getting addicted to gaming and social media, and I think this has separated them from God and church. My son is so much into gaming and is very hard to deal with this problem. What are your recommendations about this problem for the youngsters in our church? So very, I think, valid question, valid point. Because it's a full addiction now, the phones, and then as we move into as they're struggling with is the gaming aspect. So I know it may stretch a little bit outside of the social media directly, but how would you maybe respond to that with your backgrounds in this?
Well, I think that the digital dependency, I guess you could call it, that stretches to a lot of people, not even just younger, but you'd be surprised how many older audiences have dependencies on some form of digital media. Obviously, gaming is a huge form of media these days, and it always has been, but it's growing exponentially. So when you look at examples like children who have been fixated on something like that, it's very easy for that to happen, let's say, without the presence of social media, because what can happen is, for example, when you look at where is this person or where is your kid getting fed all this information or all this being encouraged to engage with games, you're getting a lot of it on Facebook, you're getting a lot of it on YouTube for sure. In terms of controlling that, or in terms of how to leverage that, it's difficult to say, because a lot of the times when we look back at when we were kids, or even when our parents were kids, or even further than that, everybody was fixated on something. Everybody. Whether it was a video game, or back then it would have been something else. I'm fairly certain that at some point we've obsessed over something to the degree where our parents at that time thought this is a problem. How to control or mitigate, or even take the attention away from that, it's hard to answer, because it's so specific to the child in this case. I have, for example, a cousin who, when he was younger, he was all over computer games, like completely obsessed with them. But he had the demeanor that he wasn't obsessed to the point where he wouldn't, do his homework or do his things like that. He was very, very easy to work with. That is not the case with everybody, obviously. So in terms of pulling attention away with people who may not be so flexible and agreeable, or children in that matter, funneling them towards different avenues through social media would be a way of trying to push them away from something that you feel they're getting too much of. But again, that in many ways is almost like going against the flow of a river. It's very, very difficult to do that.
Yeah.
And to accurately say this approach is the way to go about it is tricky.
True, but could social media actually be beneficial in this case? Because trying to take a teenager away from an Xbox and be like, okay, you're coming to church, you're going to be sitting on this Bible study, and it's such a drastic, like, the content that you're engaged with, it's just quite different. So using social media, whether it's, okay, well, how about go on YouTube, research a topic that you're interested in church-wise, and then watch a sermon on it, right? It's just maybe a medium that could bridge that gap. Obviously, like, it won't replace the desire to, like, want to play video games and stuff like that, but could be a little more engaging to the younger crowd than, attending like an hour and a half sermon where you have to, get up early in the morning, you have to dress up, and it's just like more of a kind of compromise.
Yeah, I think this is definitely a challenge. So, like everything, there's a positive way to use it, and then Satan finds a negative way to use it to pull us away from God. We've seen it with media. We can get it in TV. You can find very good things. I don't have TV because I don't think there's enough good things to justify it. But you could probably say there's some things that are beneficial that you might be able to reach broadcasts. Social media is going to be the same. So in these, yes, I think we need to realize and treat it as addictions, though, because they are. And I think they're overlooked, because we consider addiction to be drugs, alcohol, smoking, things that are very substance abuse like that. But technology has become an addiction in itself. Gaming is an addiction. And so I don't think, like we're saying, there's not a clear answer, at least that we can give. In this sense, it's, yes, social media may be able to reach these people a little bit because they're engulfed in that world as it is. So it may give them that little bit of information that they would otherwise not be able to receive. So those are maybe some positive ways that the church can use it and can maybe reach out to these people. But I think, as they're saying as well, we want to be careful that we're not promoting it too much to the point where kids are finding it as maybe an excuse to, I can use this a lot, and they're going to find other avenues, because there's so many out there that are not positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioning it as an addiction is exactly what it is. Giving someone advice on how to cut an addiction of any sort is very, very difficult. But it's true what you say, that thinking about social media as a means to, like Denitsa was saying, a means to introduce a younger audience to the information you take a certain way, but give it to them in a way that's more relatable to them. Mm-hmm. That is a very powerful way of how social media can be for that younger demographic. In a way.
I'm going to throw we got another question here. It's along the same lines, so we'll just bring that up. It says, I think Satan is using the technology to get our minds, and especially children. My wife is constantly on Facebook, spending so much time. Doesn't continue, so I don't know if it just didn't come through all the way. But it gets us the point that another situation where somebody has found Facebook, which is a form of social media, and has become an addiction, maybe to the point of harming relationships, either a marriage relationship or either just physical relationships, that we can have conversation. And I was bringing this up as we were talking earlier. I'm not big on social media. I have a really hard time when I'm talking to somebody and they're constantly in and out of other conversations. So if you're in the conversation, be in it. And you just see that there's a lot of people who are in those same situations. And again, we see how Satan can use it negatively.
I just want to add a comment to that, which ties in with the addiction a little bit. But if you look at it, anything that is being used too much could be an addiction, will have a negative impact. Whether it's technology, whether it's a hobby that you can't get yourself away from, that takes all of your time and you're not home with your family, whether it's substance, food, or anything really. So if you don't have the restraint and the discipline to moderate your time, I think could be negative. But I think that just as everything else, it has its negative side. I don't think that that should be the only way social media is looked at.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like, I guess the question was towards you guys.
As we mentioned previously, it's always got a risk factor to it.
Yeah.
And it requires responsibility from the user or the person who is in charge or responsible for the user. So, yeah, I mean, when looking at social media and how the negative impacts that it can have, they're absolutely present. But I mean, I know, for example, Lorena and yourself are more experienced in actually posting things and talking about the content that you push out there. And that's also one of the big parts of how social media can affect a person. What are you reading?
And that's the way, again, Satan can kind of use it twofold. That some people, he can use it to the point where it is a distraction and it turns them away from God. But then also people who might be able to use that for good, for God, are maybe now discouraged because they only see the negatives. So you really have to, I think, look at what are the positives and how can I use those. Even though there are some negatives, it doesn't mean we should just take it off the table completely, that we're not going to use social media because some things bad have happened. Instead, looking at what are the positives, because there's a lot, like we're talking about some of these verses. Just to bring up another one, Matthew 24:14, speaking again about sharing the gospel with the world. It says, "And this gospel of the kingdom will be preached in all the world as a witness to all nations, and then the end will come." So to all the world, to all nations. And I don't think that social media is going to be our only way of doing that, but it's a massive way that we, as we talked about some of the numbers, that we can start reaching people at a faster rate, and they can start to reach people in their communities as well. So saying that those benefits are not there is a struggle as well.
Absolutely, and it's even useful when looking at ways where a family could use it together collectively. There are, for example, I know of families that have family accounts for Instagram. And it's basically posts that the family decides to push out there. Or perhaps you start up a Pinterest board of things that you'd like to post that you think are interesting of a certain type with your kids or your spouse. There's many ways of trying to leverage social media in a family environment. But again, it does take a level of caution and responsibility.
Yeah, and also perhaps limiting your time or setting some ground rules. So like if we're at a dinner table, no phones, if you want to play video games or if you want to watch some content online, here's,
boundaries.
Yeah, put some boundaries around it, because as I said, everything, if you abuse it and just let loose, yeah, it will have negative impact for sure.
And I think also acknowledging that is a possibility, acknowledging it to yourself will help you make sure that you don't overuse it.
Yeah, for sure. I believe we
All right,
are
I think,
close to our end time
we're
here.
running out of time here. So I hope that we've given people a little bit of an introduction to maybe those who were not really familiar with social media. We're getting a message that I think we have a little bit more time here. Yep. So, so why don't we just summarize quickly then, while we do have the time. Let's maybe pick out back to the positives. So a couple of the social media platforms we talked about. I know this isn't maybe social media, but it came up is Bibles on our cell phones. I think to just highlight again that there are some benefits to it. So we talked about ways to avoid the distractions. One of them is airplane mode,
Yes.
where you can actually turn your phone off from receiving messages. So you can use it, you can have it, you can turn it off. What were a few other ones? The do not disturb.
Yeah, the do not disturb, night mode.
I think nowadays you could customize your notifications to your delight.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then just to point out as well, yes, in a digital Bible you can highlight things. You can save them, you can share them.
Yeah.
You can search your entire Bible. You can find different translations, different languages. So there are some benefits there. By no means am I encouraging people, if you like your paper Bible, I agree, it's fantastic. I'm not saying go out and throw it away and grab a digital Bible, but just maybe be a little bit more open to some of those people who are using that. And if you're using it yourself and you're not sure how to use some of those features, ask somebody. But lastly, maybe a few of the topics. So we looked at a few major social media platforms. You mentioned, Denitsa, that you're involved with your church. Our church's social media. Lorena, are you as well?
Yes, I help out with the Radio Bible-Lights Facebook account. we do the postings for the YouTube channel as well, live streaming.
And have you found it to be positive? Has it?
Yes, the outreach is actually quite rewarding. It's very nice. There's new tricks we learn every time, new ways that we can reach out to more people that are in different countries that would love to listen in.
Yeah.
English is such a popular language that a lot of the sermons will be understood.
Yeah. Even something like Radio Bible Light, which we're on now, so you're welcome for using social media. This itself has grown with a lot of hard work from a few individuals. It's in a lot of different languages. It's reaching a larger demographic, larger population. So another one of the more personal benefits for those people who are listening tonight.
I have a personal benefit that I discovered with social media is, despite that I'm here today, actually I'm not that comfortable talking in front of people that I don't know. So, door to door, or even like speaking out in front of the church, those are not my strengths. So, sometimes that could prevent me from, ministries or, getting out there. So, I think that being part of this team and the Instagram account for the church, it gives me the opportunity to still engage and feel that I still do my part in sharing the word, but without running into some of my personal obstacles.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, because we all have different gifts.
Yeah. The only other thing that I was thinking as well was that one of the beauties of social media is that it allows you, the organization, the business, whatever it is, to engage with your audience and hear their feedback.
Yes.
So a lot of people, what they want to know is, what is my client, my customer, the people under me, what are they thinking? What are their opinions? What do they actually want out of me? What do they think of what I offer them? Social media in many ways allows you to pick the brains of the people you're engaging with and to see what the actual feedback is that they have, some of the thoughts that you may not get in a personal setting, but you will get in a digital one. So that's another huge part of especially when we're talking larger than in the personal accounts, like when we're talking organizations or businesses, anything along that line. Getting that connection with your audience is always highly sought after, and social media leverages that quite a bit.
For sure. Well, I hope that we were able to bring both sides of the story today. And kind of give some best practices and some insights from the industry. I think that would be great if we can close with a prayer.
Great. So let's have a quick prayer here to close. So, dear Lord, once again, we just thank you for this opportunity that you've given us to reach out to a large community of listeners and viewers, Lord, and being able to talk about some of these things that are with us now, whether they have negatives or positives. Many of them have both, Lord, and I pray that you'll give us the insight and the knowledge to be able to draw from the positives and to be able to use those things to further your message, to further your gospel, and to reach as many people as we can, Lord, and as we struggle with some of the challenges that are faced by these same these same outreach methods, Lord, I pray that you'll again just be with us and help us to be able to overcome those and just to be able to further your word, Lord. We pray and ask that you'll be with us through the evening, and we ask in Jesus' name. Amen.
Mhm.
And we thank everyone again for joining us, and we hope that you'll be with us next week on Friday at 8 o'clock once again.